So lesson 6.7, I think, will be a little bit easier for you. Might give you your brain a little bit of a break. And we're going to be dividing polynomials. And it makes it seem really complicated, but the method that we divide is pretty straightforward. It's kind of like just doing long division, kind of similar. So the first way that we will divide, which really isn't going to come up that often, we'll divide sometimes when you can factor and when factoring is possible. And so if we look at number, I don't know why that starts on number 3, but if we look at that first problem, in the numerator, we can factor that, meaning there are two numbers that multiply to be positive 10 and add to be negative 7. Does anybody know what this would factor into? Numbers that multiply to be positive 10 but add to be negative 7. Negative 5 and negative 2. And then we have x minus 5 on the bottom. And what we can do is cancel these factors. And so we're really left with x minus 2. So x squared minus 7x plus 10 divided by x minus 5 is x minus 2. That's your answer. Now, unfortunately, what am I going to have to do to factor this one? It'll factor. You're going to have to use the box method. Now, the box method is only one of the methods to factor when there's a number in front of the x squared. Sometimes people can see the fact, like they can figure out the factors without using the box method. And if you can do that, that's okay. But usually that gives you way more of a headache. So I'm just going to keep showing you the box method. So if we factor, now this is not written as a fraction, but no, the first one would be our numerator. The second one would be the denominator. 4x squared and negative 2. We need two numbers that multiply to be what? Negative 8 and add to be negative 7. What are those? Negative 8. We put an x with them and 1x. So negative 8 times 1 is negative 8. Negative 8 plus 1 is negative 7. And then we do the GCF. So up here, the only thing that these two have in common is an x. Here, it's going to be negative 2. Because my first box is negative, I have to use the negative. What's the GCF of this top row? 4x. And this row, just 1. Yep. So we really have 4x plus 1 and x minus 2 over x minus 2. And those cancel. So 4x plus 1. Now, most of the time when you see a division problem or a fraction, fractions are basically division. So whenever you see that, most of the time it's not going to factor well. And even if it does factor, you can still do what I'm going to teach you, this synthetic division, even if it does factor. So you could always just go straight to synthetic division. So synthetic division is used when factoring isn't an option. And when we do this division, sometimes you will get a remainder. Like when you did long division way back in elementary school, sometimes you had a remainder. But if the remainder is 0, or there is no remainder, that means that what I'm dividing by is an x-intercept. So synthetic division can help us find x-intercepts as well. All right. So there's kind of a step-by-step process and a setup that we have to do to start the problem. And once we do these problems, you'll get the hang of the pattern and you'll figure out how it works. So we're going to have like a little box here. And we're going to put this number. Now the number that goes in this first box is the root. So whatever we're dividing by, basically I'm going to set this equal to 0. If I were to set this equal to 0, what would x be? -8. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm seeing if -8 is an x-intercept. If I get a remainder of 0, that means that it is an x-intercept. Now the other boxes are going to come from the coefficients. So like this is a 1x squared. So I'm going to put a 1. And then a 3x. So I'm going to put a 3. And a -43. So this is basically the setup. We get our number that we're kind of dividing by-ish, and then our coefficients. And we could have more than 3, depending on how long this numerator is. You could have 4, 5, 6 numbers going out here. All right, so bring down the first number. So that 1, bring it down. This is a major typo. I think I copied and pasted from our grouping. That is something from grouping. Ignore that. Sorry. Totally missed that. Now, this number that we brought down, we're going to multiply. So -8 times 1 is -8, and that goes there. And then you add. 3 plus -8 is -5. And then we multiply. -8 times -5. 40. And then we add. So basically, once you bring down your first number, it's multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add. And -43 plus 40 is -3. Then we have to figure out what these numbers at the bottom mean. And looking at the far right, this far right number is your remainder. And then working our way to the left, the next number is a constant. I have to go sideways here. What's a constant? Just a number that's by itself. Doesn't have a variable with it. And then the next number to the left gets an x beside of it. If I had more numbers, my next one would get an x squared, and the next one would get an x cubed, and so forth. But you just, whenever you don't have any more numbers, you stop. So what this means is that x squared plus 3x minus 43 divided by x plus 8 equals 1x minus 5. And then with your remainder, you put your remainder over that x plus 8. So if I were to really divide these, I get x minus 5 minus 3 over x plus 8. Since my remainder is not 0, negative 8 is not an x-intercept to this. So if I were to put this on the calculator, it's not going to cross at negative 8 because my remainder is not 0. So let's do some more examples before you decide that you hate this. And I only have 4 in here, but we'll probably do some more. Okay. Hard to see. So first thing we do is we got to set up the problem. So first I have my corner box. What goes in my corner box? Positive 7. If we were to set this equal to 0, we would get 7. And then across the top, I write my coefficients. So I think is that 2x squared? Looks like. Can y'all tell? 2, negative 16, 19. And then leave a space and draw a line. And this is the setup. Always have to set up your problems. Step 1 is to bring down the first number, and we get 2. Then I multiply. So bring down, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add. So 2 times 7 is 14. Then I add. Negative 16 plus 14 is negative 2. Multiply, and I get what? Negative 14. And then if I add, I get 5. The far right number is always your remainder. The next number is always your constant, so it doesn't get a variable with it. And then the next number gets an x put with it. So when I divide, my final answer is 2x minus 2, and then your remainder goes over that x minus 7. Are there any questions yet? Let's look at number 4. And let's set up the problem. Now, don't be working ahead because I haven't told you something that you might need to know for the next problem. What goes in my corner box? Positive 2. And then my coefficients go across the top. 1, 5, negative 7, 2. Back on number 3, was 7 an x-intercept? No, because my remainder was not 0. So number 4, I'm dividing. The problem is dividing, and so my answer is what I get after doing division. But you're also testing to see if we have an x-intercept. So we're going to test on this one to see if 2 is an x-intercept. So first thing I do is bring down the 1. So bring down, multiply, add, multiply, add. So 2 times 1 is 2. And then I add. 5 plus 2, 7. Multiply. We get 14. What do I get when I add? 7 times 2 is 14. What do I get when I add? 16. So is 2 an x-intercept? No. So this last number is my remainder. This number is my constant. This number gets an x. And this is the first example when we have another number. This number gets an x squared with it. So we do remainder, constant, and then x, x squared, x cubed, x to the fourth, and so on. So my final answer is x squared, or 1x squared, plus 7x plus 7 plus 16 over x minus 2. Questions? Now, if you wanted to test your answer, what you could do is just pick some random number to plug in for x. Now, don't pick 2, because if I pick 2, what's 2 minus 2? 0. And what happens when you try to divide by 0?
0.
No, you get an error. You can't divide by 0. So don't pick 2, but anything else. 5 store x. And then I'm going to type in x cubed plus 5x squared minus 7x plus 2 divided by x minus 2. And then I'm going to test out my answer. X squared plus 7x plus 7 plus 16 over x minus 2. Oops. And you get the same thing. So easy way to check your answer. Number 5. What goes in my corner box? -5. Careful. Basically, if think about if I were to set this equal to 0. You can't always just say, well, it's the opposite, because there could be an instant where you have something like 2x plus 5. And what you have in the box would be a fraction. You probably won't see any of those examples now, but that is a possibility. So I don't want you to always assume that it is just the opposite. Because if there's a number there, it's really not. Now, across the top, we're first going to have a 1. But notice how we are missing an x squared. I go from x cubed to x. You have to put in a 0 for the x squared. So you always have to be looking for a missing term. And a 0 has to go in to hold that place. So we have 1, 0, -17, 32. And then everything else is the same. So bring down your 1. And then we multiply. -5 times 1 is -5. Then if I add, I get -5. And then if I multiply, what do we get? +25. And then if I add, 8. And then if I multiply, I get -40. And then if I add, -8. First number is your remainder. Next number is your constant. Next number gets an x. Next number gets an x squared. Any questions? Let's do number 6. What goes in my corner box? 8. Am I missing any of my terms up here? You're missing x squared. So we have to make sure to put in a 0 where x squared would be. And you also need to make sure that your exponents go from largest to smallest. Generally, all of the examples you're going to see are going to be like that, but that's another good thing just to check because otherwise it doesn't come out correctly. So we have an 8, negative 64, 0, 3, negative 28. And I want you to at least, you don't have to write out your answer yet if you don't think you'll be confident in it, but at least try the synthetic division part on your own. This is what you should have. So across the bottom, 8, 0, 0, 3, negative 4. If you don't have that, try to look. Bring down your 8. 8 times 8 is 64. So multiply, add, you get 0. Multiply, you get 0. Add, you get 0. Multiply, you get 0. Add, you get 3. Multiply 24. Add to negative 4. So this last number would be your remainder. Then we have a constant. This one would be an x, x squared, x cubed. When we write the answer out, you do not need to write the ones that have zeros. So you do not need to write those. So 8x cubed plus 3, because that's just a constant, minus 4 over x minus 8. Any questions?